Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of the E to Me podcast. Happy Black History Month. And this is actually our first Monday of Black History Month. So I'm really excited to start off Black History Month with someone that is like near and dear to my heart. And I asked her, actually, we were talking one day and I was like, I know that you actually completed it was your dissertation, correct?
Yes, yes.
On the cola bean. And I was like, this sounds so interesting. And I was like, beyond us talking about it, in the setting that we were in, I was like, let's talk about this on the podcast if you're cool with it. So I have the amazing Iya Dr. Funlayo Wood here on the podcast. And I am just beyond excited. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing all the knowledge with us today, because this is going to be beyond a treat for not just me, but everyone that's listening.
Oh, absolutely. It's an honor to be with you, Alicia. You know, you're just like so wonderful and a joy to be around, a joy to listen to.
Thank
And
you.
us, alto voiced women got to stick together, right? So I love that. We're like on frequency. I
Yes.
love it. And I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am like I said, I am just beyond excited. And you know, before we actually hit record, obviously we were talking because that's just what people do, right? So
Sure. Got to.
we were right, exactly, right. Listen, we gotta catch up with one another, And so I was asking about your name, and so I just want you to, explain your name and then just everything about like the meaning of it because it's so special.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for having me. I am Iya Dr. Funlayo Wood, affectionately known as your favorite scholar priestess. And so my name touches on those two aspects of my being. Iya is a title that means mother, and so it indicates my status as a priestess in the Ifa Orisha tradition. And then, of course, Doctor talks about the PhD and
Yes.
those studies. And so I was initiated as a priestess in the Ifa Orisha tradition. It'll be 15 years this year in June. And I received my PhD in African and African American Studies and Religion from Harvard. It'll be 6 years ago this year. And so my whole thing is to bring together scholarship, spirit, and service, and to really both practice as well as teach publicly and in my community about African spirituality. And of course, a big part of African spirituality, which people don't realize, food is a huge part of African spiritual practice. So I'm excited to get to talk to you about food. As you mentioned, I did my dissertation on the kola nut. And although I was focusing on it more in the spiritual context because we do use it for ritual purposes, it's a very important food item. It, in fact, is the basis for one of the most popular food items in the world, that being Coca-Cola. And so
Right.
the kola nut was the original source of caffeine in all of the drinks that are called cola. And so they were actually intended to be health tonics because the kola nut has health, things, blood cleansing properties and different properties in it. And so as I was doing the work, although, like I said, I was focusing on it from a spiritual perspective, I couldn't help but also learn about the food perspective of it as well. And so I'm excited to talk about that and everything else we're going to talk about.
That is so interesting. So it's like, because I definitely wanted to talk about the spiritual aspect because I know you have. Remind me again of the practice again. I'm so sorry.
Ifa, it's called Ifa Orisha.
So if you could give us like a base, like a really simple like explanation, because even myself, I'm not that well versed about the actual practice. If you could just share with
Sure.
us what that looks like, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm beyond interested. I've been wanting to even talk to you about it before, but it just seems like every time I've
Absolutely.
had the opportunity.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to. Of course, it's something that I, of course, love to talk about. I base my whole life around teaching around it.
Uh-huh.
So Ifa is a tradition that comes out of West Africa from the Yoruba speaking peoples of West Africa, and it spread to the diaspora during the transatlantic slave trade. And also later, now we've had more direct connection with the continent, and more people kind of going there in order to connect with it and become initiated in things of that nature. As far as beliefs go, believe in one God that we call Olodumare, and believe that there are emissaries of that God who are called Orisha, who represent different aspects of nature, different philosophical archetypes. You might liken them in ways to angels or saints. And in fact, it was that analogy between the Orisha and the saints that led to the tradition's survival in the Caribbean, because it became syncretized with Catholicism in the Caribbean by and large. And so, for example, one of the Orishas that we call Shango got associated with Santa Barbara, and the Orisha that we call Obatala became associated with Saint Peter, right? And so there were all of the Orishas became associated. Obatala is also associated with Jesus. Right? And so all of these associations allowed our ancestors to continue practicing their own traditions under the cover of appearing to practice Catholicism. And the tradition also spread to places that weren't Catholic, but it was most intact, maintained in Cuba and Brazil, both of which are Catholic countries. And so from the time of about the 50s, after the Cuban Revolution, that's really when the tradition found its way into the United States. It didn't really come directly. And so most people in the United States, Black Americans who practiced the tradition, actually got it by way of Cuba. And so there's a big connection between Black Americans and Cubans. A lot of it came through music and dance. Catherine Dunham and folks like that who were bringing different dance troupes from Cuba and from other parts of the diaspora to the States. So art, food, dance, all of these things have been intertwined in the practice of this tradition, and it spreads throughout the diaspora.
That is so amazing and interesting. So I guess for me, because I'm like, now we're going down this actual, I guess I call it like a rabbit hole. So as this relates to African tradition and Christianity, in terms of how Black Americans have always been like in the practice of practicing Christianity, right? I know in my family, there were things that my family did do, but they always thought of it in a negative connotation. And it was like voodoo or whatever. And it's just like, what does that, I guess for me, because I never really asked my family that did practice, those things, because we were just kind of told, like, don't mess with them. They're doing their thing. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely makes sense. African spirituality has been maligned since the time we got here. So here's the thing. We weren't Christians when we came here. Right. We came with our own traditions. Some of us had already been converted to Islam. So some of the people who came were Muslim, which is one of the reasons why groups like the Nation of Islam came to be, and saw Islam as a more ancient religion of Black folks, not realizing that even that had come in and taken over the local traditions. And so we came with our traditions. We came as Congo people, as Yoruba people, as people from all different parts of the continent with our traditions, and we maintained our traditions, not in the same wholesale kind of way that the Orisha tradition got preserved in Cuba, and there are reasons for that. But absolutely, we have in the U.S. what's called hoodoo. And hoodoo is what encompasses our African spiritual traditions, and a lot of hoodoo practice actually got encoded into the church. So even as we look at things like the ring shout, even as we look at certain types of charismatic practice, the singing and dancing and speaking in tongues and all of these types of things that speak to spirit possession, that comes from our African heritage. Those things aren't a part of Christianity proper. They have become associated with Christianity, but they don't come from Christianity. Even the way that we preach and our call and response, all of those things actually come from our African practices. But as you mentioned, African spirituality, because of white supremacy, because of the Christocentric focus of this country and the imposition of this tradition onto us, there has been a lot of malignment of anything that was African or of anything that came before. It's called heathenism, it's called devilish, it's called all of these things. Even the term voodoo is an attempt to make another tradition spooky, right? The vaudou is actually the way that it's pronounced in terms of Haitian vaudou, which is the tradition that people are usually referring to when they say voodoo. But even the spelling of that, at the Americanized spelling with the 4 O's, was meant to kind of take away from what the tradition actually was and create this sort of spooky type of energy around it, and to say that it's something evil or that it's bad or that it's only used to hurt people or things of that nature, none of which is true. Right? Water can hurt people. People can drown, but we don't say that water is evil, right? Anything can hurt someone if used in that way. And Christianity has hurt many people, right? Because of the way that it's been used, not because of necessarily it itself. And so one of my crusades, I'll say, because it's that serious for me as an activist, has been to really educate, especially Black folks, about our own traditions, to educate us about African spirituality, to let us know that it is not in any way evil, that it is not in any way bad, that it was actually actively taken away from us and presented as something bad in order to take away our power. Because this, for any people, their spiritual practices and the things that reflect their own power is where they are able to draw the force to act in the world. And of course, if you want to enslave people, right, if you want to keep them subjugated, you're not going to want them to have anything that uplifts them or that makes them feel powerful. You're only, even when they gave the Bible to enslave people, they only gave them certain portions. Right, that would further make them feel that it was okay that they were enslaved. And so all of that, you know, is something that I very much work against, right, and that I teach against, and that I also, you know, I'm not one to, I'm also very careful as well not to denigrate our practice of Christianity as Black folks, and understand that many of us who adopted Christianity adopted it because we were able to see these similarities and congruences with our own traditions. And so this idea of Jesus, for example, as the healer, as the one who set things right, as the one who calls for the highest moral character in saying, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, that example ties right in with Ifa, where our tradition tells us that it's character we seek first. That good character is the highest virtue that any person could have. And that as long as you have good character, that's going to be your protection. That's going to be what helps to carry you through life, right? And so they saw these similarities, not only with the Yoruba tradition, but with all of their traditions, and were able to take what they needed in order to empower themselves with what they had.
That is so beautiful to me. Like, seriously, because... And it's refreshing hearing it from you, and like knowing that what I saw as a child might not have been a negative thing that these people were doing. You know what I'm saying? And so...
Not at all. And the thing about it, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I get so excited about this because,
I love this.
You know, it's your family. It's people who love you.
Right.
You know them every day. Why would they all of a sudden be doing something bad or evil or negative? Right? Like, where would that even come from, to think that that's what was going on? Like, the things that we see people doing, when we see them doing rituals, when we see them singing songs, or, you know, making medicines, that's what they're doing, is making medicines, making things to heal, right? African Americans, we didn't have access to doctors in many cases, or to white doctors. And so it was the root people, the hoodoo men and the hoodoo women, and the people who knew the herbs and things like that from the continent, who were the healers. And guess what? Even white folks would come to those folks as healers at times, because they knew that we knew how to survive in different environments, how to survive through malaria, how to survive through these different things that Europeans really didn't know anything about. So even inoculation, all this stuff about vaccines and what have you,
Right.
inoculation started in Africa. We were the
Wow.
first ones to discover that if you cut the skin and introduce a little bit of a particular illness, and it started off with smallpox, that could actually prompt the body to defend itself. Now they may not
Right.
have known all the microbial terminologies at that time,
Right.
but you just because you don't know what to call something or you don't have words for that particular thing doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. Right. And so
Exactly.
they knew what they
Exactly.
were doing. And that got introduced here. It was actually in Boston. A man who was enslaved in Boston, who had came straight from the continent, is who introduced the idea of inoculation to his so-called master, who
Right.
then went and spread it to the rest of the folks, trying not to let anybody know that he learned it from this enslaved man, because he felt that if they knew he learned it from him, they wouldn't want to take the knowledge, right? And
Right.
so understanding our brilliance as African descended people,
Right.
and particularly, for our purposes around food, is very, very important. We cultivated the first plants on the continent. We are the
Yeah.
first people. We did the first everything, right? And so, the vegetables, half of the foods that we eat here in the States, especially the ones that are considered American, that are very much connected here, came from the continent. Right.
Right.
And especially a lot of those things that we as African Americans eat. And so really, like I said, for me, it's a really important thing to just highlight and uplift the contribution that Africans have made to this world, both spiritually, in terms of food, in terms of art, in terms of culture, in every way.
That is amazing. Oh, gosh, I love this. I'm just like lit, like on every word you're saying right now.
No,
No, I'm serious. It's like wow,
it's what I love. It's what I love.
and it shows. Like it. I mean, just you just lighting up from just talking about this, and I'm like right there with you. I'm like, thank you, because it's like so many things that and I'm pretty sure other people too are feeling this as well. It's like I would have never known this information, and it never would have been probably presented because it's just not popular
Right.
information to
It's
share.
intentional. It's
Right.
intentional. It's not even, I'll go a step further, because I don't mind being the the revolutionary and saying
I'm
it's
here for
not
it.
even, it's not left out. It is intentionally suppressed in
Mm,
order to make us believe that we have not contributed anything to the world. In
right.
order to make us believe that we were just there waiting for someone to pick us up and enslave us, and that we
Mm,
did not have anything going on before we got introduced to everything here. And
right.
nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. So, in terms of the Ifa culture, I mean, the Ifa actual spirituality practices, how did you come to actually say, okay, this is the actual practice that's for me? You know what I'm
Mm-hmm,
saying?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was really through attending. So I'll go back. The first experience that I ever had with African spirituality, period, actually was in Ghana and with the Akan
Oh,
tradition. And I took a trip to Ghana through a study abroad. And as it turned out, the professor who I was traveling with was a priestess in the Ifa tradition, although I didn't know that at the time that I booked the trip. I didn't know anything about any of this.
right.
And so when we were there, we went to the Black and White Shrine, which is a famous shrine in Kumasi, and they were doing a ritual. And when I tell you that I entered the space and it was like every molecule in my body just lit up, right? Like I started sweating. I'm sweating now, so I know I'm talking right, because I start to sweat, right? All the water starts to come out my body when I'm excited. And so
Yeah.
I was like, just, and it wasn't hot like that. I just literally started sweating. Tears started coming down. And the
Wow.
professor looked over at me and she was like, oh, okay, let's get you back. Like the energy is affecting you a little bit too much at this moment, especially
Right.
because you don't really know what's going on. So
Right.
she took me back and, we did some things. I actually got to talk to the priest and what have you. And by the time I left that trip, I was like, yeah, this is what I've been looking for, right? African spirituality. Like this is what I have been seeking, what my soul has been seeking. Because as you
Hmm.
know, I was raised Christian and I always enjoyed church, right? I
Right.
enjoyed the pageantry, I enjoyed the singing, I enjoyed the communalism and all of those things. But the theology, I was like, I don't like this. I don't like this idea that women brought sin into the world. I don't like this idea
Right.
that anybody who doesn't believe this thing is somehow damned. I don't like these things. And so
Right.
those things never resonated in my spirit. And I said, well, I will one day, something will resonate in my spirit in that way. I didn't go the route where, you know, a lot of people go when if they reject church or they reject whatever tradition they were raised with. Often people can go to the, well, there is no God, or to the atheism
Right.
side. And that was never it for me. I was like, no, I feel something. I know there's something out there. Now. I'm feeling the spirit, but I don't feel it the way that I'm being told or what's
Right.
being presented to me. And so it wasn't until, and so I always was into the earth. You know, I was that kid that always wanted to stay in the water all day long, would collect rocks and shells and play with bugs and, you know, climb trees and do all of these kind of things. And so definitely I was like, you know, whatever it is, there's going to be this reverence for the earth. There's going to be something that I feel. And so when I went to Ghana and had that experience, that was the first time that I really felt that. And I was like, okay, this is it. So how do I get it now? You know, who do I talk to? Where do I sign up? You know, kind of thing. And so when I got back to the States, as it turned out, I mean, and tell you how spirit works, I was in school at the time, and I got back to school, and one of the classes that I had registered for, the teacher was a priestess in this tradition.
What?
Right.
What are the odds?
And so I was like, wait, what? Like, you who? What?
Right.
Are you serious? I was like, yeah, I really wanted to get into this. And so she became my first teacher. She was the first one who began to kind of really teach me about the tradition, took me around to things. Shout out to her, Iya Dr. Gloria Rodriguez. She took me around to different events in the community, introduced me to folks and things like that to begin with. And that was my first foray down the path. And ultimately, I ended up going to Nigeria to do my initiations. So I have spiritual family there. Efwape Olatunji, they shout him out, Baba, who's my Oluwo, as it's called, the one who initiated me there. And then after becoming initiated, I came back and connected with another teacher here, Baba Oluwole Ifa, who's been my spiritual mentor and master teacher since my initiation. And so that's kind of like the abbreviated version, but, you know, I basically came to it through a deep experience. You know, after once I felt that feeling, I was like, okay, this is what it is that I was looking for. And now I was just open and I was hungry and I wanted to go to every festival I could go to, and I wanted to, you know, learn everything I could, and I, you know, got all the books that I could get, and that's where ultimately I wanted to study the tradition. And so that's actually what led me to do the PhD, because I didn't really have doing a PhD on my radar like that until after I did, you know, my initiation. And I said, all right, if I do a PhD, they can pay for me to travel and study what I want to study and all of that. And so it worked out beautifully. It really, really did.
So the transition to, you know, practicing this spiritual practice, and then this prompting your PhD, how did that then formulate into you studying the cola nut? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's of course it's a sordid tale with many ups and downs and twists and turns. But very shortly, you know, ultimately, of course, anyone who's doing a PhD, you have to find a focus, you know, something that is big enough that will sustain a whole research project, but specific enough that you'll actually be able to do it in the allotted time. And so one of the things that I'm very much interested in is communication, right? I've always been a communicator. I'm a talker, love to tell jokes, act, all of those things. And so I was looking at divination, or what's often called readings, or how we communicate with the divine, and the types of words that are used around that, the types of practices, etc. And one thing that began to strike me, you know, I spent a total of 18 months in Nigeria doing research, going to, you know, different shrines, going to festivals, just being around people practicing the culture. And the kola nut was something that was like hidden in plain sight. It was literally every single ritual, every single festival, every single everything. The kola nut was at the center of it. And I was like, this is interesting, right? Like nobody's,
Right.
and I would be looking up things about it. There's no books that have been written about it in the spiritual context as yet. A few articles. There's been a lot more writing on it actually as a food item, because one of the
Right.
things about the kola nut is that it is one of the few plants like coffee that has naturally occurring caffeine. And this was one of the interests of the Europeans who enslaved Africans in order to keep them working, right? Because it's something that you could eat that would give you energy without you having to eat more food, right? And
Wow.
it would stave off hunger, so you could potentially eat less, have more energy, and all of those types of things. So they began bringing it along with enslaved people over here and trying to cultivate it, although it didn't really take off. The only place that it really cultivated, and it's actually a different species than the one that I talk about in the book, but is in Jamaica, where they call it busy nut because it keep you busy. Right? And so as I looked at this, I said, wow, this is really fascinating. Like literally every single ritual that I attend, we're using this kola nut to communicate with the divine, and no
Right.
one has written about this. And so that's really what led me down the path. At first, I was really kind of looking at the divine communication in a little more of an abstract way. And then, as I began to focus in on the kola nut, I said, okay, this is gonna be my focus, because this is, really where I have a character to tell a story about now.
Right.
Because the kola nut is considered a feminine entity, right? And so the one that we use for divination in particular is called Iya Obi, which means the mother kola. And there's a lot of different things that just go into even the mythology around how the kola got to earth, and all of these different types of things really, really fascinated me. And the fact, of course, I'm very much interested in, of course, women's practices and gender and sexuality and these things.
Right.
And women are the ones who are said to, that should sell kola. So all of the historically and traditionally, the people that sold cola, that brought it to the marketplace, market people, period, were women traditionally.
Right.
But the cola nut in particular, there are verses in our spiritual scriptures that say that it's women who should have the cola, that it's women who should sell the cola, and things of that nature. So it drew me in. It drew me in.
I love that.
And I'll just add quickly too that
Yeah.
another very interesting part of me writing about cola is that in our spiritual tradition, when we become initiated, we may get what are called taboos, or things that we cannot do. Certain colors maybe that you can't wear, or foods that you can't eat, or things like that. The
Right.
cola nut is my taboo. So
What?
I cannot eat it. I've never tasted it, right?
Really?
I received it as a taboo during my initiation before I even really knew what it was.
Right.
And, there's an adage in Ifa that tells us that the things that are taboo may actually become our medicines at some point, which is why we don't want to desensitize ourselves to it. And so the cola has, in a way, become like my intellectual medicine, right? The thing that I can't ingest, but that all of my scholarship is based around.
That is so you were given the taboo after you started this whole process with your with your PhD.
No, for before.
Oh.
Before. It was actually the first thing that happened when I got to Nigeria, went through my initiation. I was told, they held one up and said, look, don't eat this. This is your taboo. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what that is. So
Right.
no problem. And then I came to find out how central it actually was to all the rituals, and the fact that during the course of ritual, you actually do eat it. So people would be passing it around, and I'm like, oh, this is that thing they said for me not to eat, so my
Right.
attention was already on it. I think, which is why when it came time for me to do the writing, and when it came time for me to really dive deeper into my research, it came back to the forefront to me. Like, oh, this thing that I can't eat, but y'all eat it every day, and y'all work with it every day. And so, and I still have to use it for my practice, but I just,
Right.
I don't ingest
Can't
it.
ingest it. Okay. And so that's what I was going to ask. So when you are given a taboo, is it like, are there multiple people like in the practice that have the same taboo, or how does
Oh
that work?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. The taboos come as a result of what we call Odu, or our spiritual scriptures, or the readings that govern
Mm.
each person's life. So imagine, and in Hoodoo actually, there is a practice of this where people will pray, and a certain scripture might become their life scripture, right? And
Right.
so we have that practice. It's a little more formalized through what we call Odu. And so, based on the particular scripture or Odu that governs a person's life, that's what actually indicates what their taboos will be and things of that nature. So, of course, if people have the same Odu governing their life, they could have the same taboos, or there are similar taboos that exist in different scriptures. So that's how it's indicated.
That is, wow, that is so fascinating. I love this. Like, I am just, I'm
I'm
almost like,
glad you gotta come take some of my classes
I
and
was,
dive
I'm
even
serious.
deeper.
Yes, I definitely will, because I'm just sitting here like in awe. I'm like, I just feel like I have learned, I know nothing. I'm being honest, because
Yeah,
it's
well, we don't know what we don't know, right? And
right,
that's the whole thing. Most of us don't know. I didn't know until I
right,
knew, right?
right,
Because this information has been hidden from us. It's been
right,
kept from us. Our ancestors who maintained these traditions did so under the threat of death. There were laws against
right.
practicing our traditions. Like, literally, people were executed for practicing these traditions and being found out because, as I said, these are our sources of power. And when
Right.
you're trying to keep someone in subjugation, you do not want them to have anything that gives them power. That's your biggest threat, is them feeling empowered.
Right.
Their biggest threat is us feeling empowered. And so
Right.
everything, and including food, right? Including having us feel like or think that, oh, veganism is some white stuff. Hello, we cultivated the vegetables first. How could eating vegetables be white people stuff? The vegetables don't even grow in Europe. Come on,
Right.
stop it. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
these ideas have been perpetuated to have us believe that we haven't contributed, and that we should be on this low vibration all the time, and that we haven't contributed anything high vibrational to the world, and everything that is high vibrational in the world has come from us because we are the original people.
And that is something. So I have like two things, but I definitely want to say this before I forget. So the vibrational component, that has been like almost like
It's been a joke going around.
right. It's kind of like this now popular thing. Everyone's trying to vibrate higher. Like you see all these hashtags, hashtag
Right.
vibrate higher, this, that, and the other. And I feel like a lot of people that I follow on social media, like particularly like African Americans, they're coming into something like they're not real, that they don't know, but they're seeking out this high vibration status, right? But don't know how to access it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
think it's by way of Christianity. And it's not anything to say Christianity is terrible or anything like that. But we have, at least in the religion I grew up in, there was never the opportunity to really talk about being on a vibrational wavelength and actually seeking high vibration, or you're in a lower vibrational state. Is that something in the Ifa like traditions and spirituality, spirituality practices, that's actually a part of the education component?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Mm,
mean, we may not use, the term vibrational, right? But what we
right.
have, what we call ashe. So ashe
Okay.
is life force. Ashe is the power to make things happen. Ashe is vital energy. And so, absolutely, a big part of what we do, the reason why we do rituals and all the things that we do, is to elevate our ashe, right? Is to
Mm,
bring our energy up to a level where we can use it, right? Where we have good empowerment. And so, I think definitely you see a lot of that in Christianity as well, but it gets talked about differently, right?
right.
So, people will talk about having Christ consciousness or being closer to Christ, right?
Right.
And really the thing about it is that Christ, as we know from study, is a title, right? And so Christhood talks about a certain level of vibration, a
Mm,
certain level of consciousness, right? Yeshua is the person, but Christ is a title that talks about a certain type of spiritual cultivation. And so when even, and I talk about this a lot because I still have resonances with Christ consciousness, that when Jesus said, I am the way and I'm the light, he wasn't talking about worshiping him. He was
Yes.
talking about being on the level of Christ consciousness that he's on, right? And of raising our consciousness to that level. That's really what was being talked about, so that we can love our neighbors as we love ourselves, so that we can heal people who have afflictions, so that we can exist in this space of being non-judgmental and be only casting stones if we've never sinned. Right?
Right.
Those are it's the Christ consciousness that allows us to do those things. And so that's exactly what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about vibration. He's talking about raising consciousness.
Right.
And so it's the same thing in Ifa. It's the same thing in every spiritual tradition.
Right.
In Hinduism, they call it prana, right? Where we try to, or kundalini, right? Where we try to raise our energy, and we do different breathing exercises and hand positions and bodily positions. That's where yoga comes from, to try to cultivate our energy to flow in particular ways. In Ifa, we do it through ritual. We do it through chanting and singing and dancing. This is one of the ways that those are some of the ways that we raise our vibration.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving it. I'm just like, more. Like, no, I'm serious. So I was going to go back to, so when you actually have like different spiritual practices, is food, you were saying like food is incorporated?
Oh yeah. Food
and then what
everything.
types of foods are actually involved in the spiritual rituals that take place in your religion?
Ooh, I'm glad you asked. This is one of my favorite topics. Okay.
Yay.
So first of all, I love to eat. Okay. And I love to cook, and I love food.
Right.
So food, when we talk about, let's take a step back even before we get to the spirituality, and just talk about hospitality as an African philosophical concept. Right? Hospitality is very important in African cultures, feeding people. And as you know, in Black American cultures too, when people come, they say, oh, have you eaten? Let me cook you something. Let me give you something, right? People always want to feed you. And so food and nourishment, because without food, we die. And so food really represents life force and vital energy. It also represents our own energy, because most of all the foods that we eat today, we have to use our own energy to cultivate them. Right? And so it represents the energy that we put in to cultivation, as well as the energy that we exchange amongst ourselves to keep our societal and communal bonds going. We know that exile traditionally meant death. If people were exiled from the community, you didn't have access to food. You didn't have access to those feasts. And this is why feasting is such a huge practice in so many different traditions, because this idea of abundant food is like, we're doing well, we're using our energy well, and it is traditional to offer some of that food to whatever divinities a group may worship or may interact with.
Right.
And so in Ifa, we use many different foods. Most of them are the traditional foods that grow in that part of Nigeria. So one of the most common foods that we use is the white yam, which is, I will mention that the African white yam is the reason why people in the diaspora call sweet potatoes yams, because our ancestors saw the sweet potato and it looked like a yam. So we're the ones that started calling it that, even though what we call yam here is actually a sweet potato, and the African yam is white and very much more starchy.
Right.
So we use that. We use black-eyed peas, we use plantains, we use okra, we use everything, sugarcane, corn, watermelon, any edible food, basically, you can be offered to some shrine, because whatever we can eat, they can eat. And again, it's a symbolic representation as well of the energy of cultivation. And so we actually have divinities as well who are related to cultivating the land. So we have a divinity called Orisha Oko, who is the Orisha of the farm, the Orisha of cultivation, and his whole energy is about making the land grow, right? To make sure that we have food, to make sure that we're able to eat. And so we do rituals to him to bless the land, to ensure that it will always be fruitful, to ensure that we will always have food. And a part of the rituals that we do is giving portions of the first harvest to him, dedicating, offering them to his shrines and things like that. Porridge, all kind of everything, right? And then we do a lot of ancestral veneration. That's actually the very first step into any African spiritual practice, is honoring our ancestors. And so as we do that, we tend to offer foods to our ancestors that we know they liked. So there's what I got over here. I got some grapes and some bacon on my altar right now that they eating on and enjoying. Basically everything that I eat, I offer a small portion of it to my ancestors every day.
And now that's literally what I was going to ask you. Like, how often so every day, whatever you eat, you offer it to the ancestors.
Yes.
So I guess for me, because here's the thing, I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so in that practice, the idea of ancestors or spirits beyond death, that's not a thing.
Right. It's frowned upon, and as it is in many aspects of Christianity. Although it's interesting because, of course, and of course, this is one of the reasons we had the Protestant Reformation and why there's Protestantism and Catholicism, because Catholicism still holds for the life after death, so to speak, in the sense of venerating saints and things like that. Saints are basically deified ancestors in a sense. And so Catholicism still holds room for that, whereas Protestantism said, nah, we not having that no more. And so that was one of the big things that was a big difference in practice that caused the split. Right. And so definitely in most Protestant denominations, you will see that, and again, this was a way to cut us off from what was most important to us, because we are ancestral venerating people, to say, no, your ancestors are gone. There's no ancestral veneration. Just only focus on Jesus, or only focus on this thing that we're giving you. And so again, taking away a big base of our power.
That for me is like so profound, because as a child, I always felt like there has to be more. And these people, even though physically they're not here, there are moments, there are dreams that I have, and I'm like, I just can't think that this is it. Right?
Right. Well, and if we say that there's God, and if we say that there's heaven, right? Some of the ways, even if we think about some of what we're taught, it doesn't add up. If a spirit can exist in heaven, or go to this place that we call heaven, then how can you then say spirits don't exist, or nothing happens after we die? If we can go to this place and be tortured or be rewarded, then spirits got to be somewhere. Right.
Right. And thank you for that. Like, seriously, that is something that, and even still now with me, and I wanted to ask you as well, like, I don't really practice any type of religion like as I did growing up. I'm still on a journey with that too, along with my whole eating situation. But was that a hard transition for you to kind of like remove yourself? I mean, maybe you haven't completely removed yourself from Christianity, but was that a hard transition for you? Or is that something that you still kind of like deal with?
I would say it is. There's two answers to this. So I will say there was not a transition in the sense that I never internalized Christian theology. Okay. Right. Whenever I never went forward and got baptized or did any of those things, because from a very young age, I was like, this doesn't quite ring true to me. Right. So I'm going to just enjoy the practice, but I'm not going to take myself deeper into it. But I've always loved spirituality, period. So I've read the Bible, I've read the Torah, I've read the Quran, I've read the Upanishads, all the sacred texts in the world that I could read, I've read them. And things of that nature. And so, in that sense, it was easy for me because I had never internalized a lot of the ideas that can keep people sometimes locked in and unable to shift. Right. And then on the other hand, I actually embrace my background in the church.
Yeah.
right? Because I recognize that for African Americans, Christianity became our venue for our own spiritual practices, right?
Mm.
So even if I don't necessarily resonate with Christian theology, I resonate with gospel music, right?
Yes.
And I resonate with the preaching homiletics, and I resonate with these things that when I trace them back, I see, oh, these are the African things in the church that I'm
Right.
resonating with, right? I'm resonating with our speech patterns. I'm resonating with our storytelling. I'm resonating with our praise and worship. I'm resonating with the Holy Spirit coming down and us
Right.
having spirit possession, which is
Right.
something that's very big in Ifa as well. And so, you know, those things still resonate a lot with me. And if you listen to how I deliver my talks every Sunday, I mean, I'm a pastor basically. I
Right.
have church every Sunday, right? And prayer and meditation every Sunday morning. And when you listen to how I speak, you can't hear me speak and not hear the Black church in how I
Right.
speak. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is a way that I have embraced our practice of church, or what my one of my students, Jade T. Perry, calls churchiness, right? And she said churchiness doesn't mean Christianity. Churchiness is embodying those aspects of the Black church that come from our Africanity. Right. And not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily have to coincide with accepting the whole of Christian theology.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I know for me that, like I said before, that was always a struggle for me to kind of like step away completely from the idea of everything I learned in the Seventh-day Adventist church. And there's
Sure.
nothing, I don't want to take away anything from that, because I did learn a lot, even just down to the health practices and things of that nature. But, you know, like,
But there's also a lot that's very restrictive. I mean, and
Right.
the only way that we can be honest about this is by being honest about it and saying,
Right.
look, there are things that are good. There are things that have sustained us. There are things that empower us on a certain level. But then there are other things that are extremely restrictive. There are
Right.
other things that were meant to try to control us. There are other things that are exclusionary, both to people of other faiths, both to
Right.
LGBTQ people, both
Right.
to people of differing abilities. I mean, there's all kinds of things that come out that, you know, we have to question. And
Right.
the only way that we can really have a healthy relationship with anything is being able to question it, right? And that's one of the things that I love about Ifa too, because there is no just do this. Ifa tells us that we would rather throw away every shrine that we have than to ever throw away our own head.
Wow.
Right? So it comes back to us and our discernment as people to say, look, you know what's right and what's not right.
Right.
It comes back to you, and it comes back to your responsibility as a human being. And in order for us to work properly as human beings, we have to cultivate the ashe, as we talked about, and raise that vibration and make sure that we're operating at a level that our head is able to lead us where we need to go, and able to discern the things that we should follow from the things that we shouldn't. But there's no, you know, it's this way or the highway, and you only do this, and this is why. People ask me all the time, you know, if I come into Ifa, does that mean that I can't be Christian anymore, or I can't be Muslim anymore, or I can't be? And I said, no. The whole reason why Christianity was even able to come into Yoruba land and other parts of Africa the way it did is because we've always been religiously plural. We look at somebody's tradition and we say, oh, okay, that could work for us too. Come on, right? We could put Jesus over here with Obatala and Oshun and all the rest of them, and they good, right? There's no like, you have to just do this and that's it. We don't, we've never had that as an attitude. Africans are pragmatists. We do what works. We're like, if it's working, we gonna try it. You know what I mean? We're not so committed to what we're doing, even if it's not working. I actually just told a story about this morning. We're not so committed to what we're doing that even if it's not working, or even if we see something else that works better, we're going to say, oh, I can never try that because it's not what I do. We say, well, let me see how I can incorporate that into what I'm doing. Right? And that's like the most African attitude you can have.
this is, I'm thinking about my mother who has passed on, but it's so funny growing up. Like I said, I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist church, but she would go to church anywhere. Like if and I'm not even joking, and she would just let people know. She's like, wherever God is, that's where I'm going to
That's
be.
where I'm at. Look, me and Mama Iba, right in peace to her spirit, because that's me. I can go anywhere in the world. I'm going to go to a Hindu temple. I'm going to go to the indigenous. I'm going to go to the Catholic church. I'm going to go wherever. Anywhere spirit is being honored, I'm there.
Yes, I love that. And that's just so like comforting to me, because I would always laugh, like, why does my mom, like, literally, she would just, if there was some type of spiritual something, she wanted to be there. She's like, God is in this. Why not? Why not go? Like,
that is beautiful. She was a true, and that's how you could tell a true person of God, though. Right. Somebody who's a truly spiritual person and who's not just hung up on dogma. Who says, look, I can see the God in what everybody's doing. That doesn't mean I have to do it exactly how they're doing it, but I could visit. I could see how they're doing it. I could feel the spirit the way they feel it. Right? That's beautiful. I love that. And, my parents are very much like that, too. And that's one of the things that, I'm so appreciative of, that they have been, my parents are pastors. Shout out to Reverend Ralph and Reverend Regina, Bethel Baptist Church. They're so wonderful. And, they really see that, too. They look at me and they're like, oh, okay, you're doing what we're doing on a slightly different path. But we're doing the same thing. We're both leading congregations. We're both encouraging people. We're both trying to help people live their best lives and elevate themselves and be better. And how could that ever be a bad thing? Right.
No, I love that. And so I was going to ask you, so in terms of, you were saying there are, you have teachers. Now, do the teachers, or let me backtrack. So Iya, the name Iya, is that given to you by your teacher? Like, how does that work? Or is that just something that's instant? Like, that's just a part of your name? Or do you have to, like, be taught an X amount of, or whatever, to actually get the name Iya?
Yeah, well, so Iya is a title, right? So it means mother, any woman that is initiated has the right to be called Iya, regardless of whether she's, been trained or not. It's a title. And really, it's a title that could be used even if a person's not initiated. We call elder women Iya as well, just as a respect, kind of as we do in Black American culture, that your auntie or you, some kind of a title, mother, like in the church, the same kind. That's where it comes from, right? This idea of the mother's board. And notice that there's only a mother's board in most churches, not a father's board, because the mothers are the ones who are the most revered as the most powerful figures, as the seat of authority. Women were the seat of authority in our traditions. And so that's why every Black church you see has a mother's board. Right? And it's the elder women. Right now. It's the elder women, right? And then so Funlayo is the name that I was given during my initiation. Efun Funlayo is the full name, which means Obatala has given us joy. And Obatala is the divinity that I'm initiated to. And so typically when a person undergoes initiation, they'll be given a name that's related to their Orisha. So there's another name, for example, Eshu B. A person who is initiated to Eshu might get that name, which means Eshu gave birth to me, right? And so every name has a meaning that's connected to the spirit to which one is initiated. So you can have the name and then also the title of Iya if you're a woman, or Baba is the title for a man.
Oh, okay. That is, that's so, I'm just like blown away, because the whole motherboard thing, I was like, yes.
And even the hats and things, right? When we look at, you see what I'm wearing, what we call gele or head wrap, that is where church hats, right? The tradition of church hats came from our head wraps and our head adornments on the continent. Again, you only see Black women do this. This is not something that comes from Christianity. This is something that comes from our African heritage of adorning ourselves. And you see that only women of certain status can come into the church with them big hats on, right? Because, and the same thing in our traditions, the bigger your head wrap, the more cloth that you had on your head wrap, the higher your status and those types of things. So all of that, the oil anointings, right? All of those kinds of things come from our traditions.
I am just sitting here in awe because everything you're saying, like all that was happening in the church. Like,
Even the wearing of white, right? Wearing
yes.
white, the wearing of the same color for events, right?
Uh-huh.
Those kinds of things. We, in Yoruba, they call that ashoebi, or family cloth. That
Right.
whenever there's an event, everybody will wear the same pattern cloth. And we've adopted that. You see in the black church. Okay, everybody's going to wear orange next Sunday, or everybody's going to wear blue. Same. That's where that
Same.
practice comes from.
This is I think it's just warming my heart too because I don't know much about like my I obviously like most African Americans, the actual African side of who I am. So it's like I'm just literally sitting here just like, oh my goodness, just blown away because I mean, but that also would require me, and it is for me to actually start learning more, obviously. And I'm going to now after we've talked because I'm just like, I can't stop
You
now.
don't know how happy
I
you're making
can't.
me to hear that. I'm ready to have you, and that's how I felt when I first started learning about these things. I mean, like I said, I've always been into spirituality and things, and I actually, the first non-Christian tradition that I really practiced was actually Hinduism. I got connected with Shiva, and I had a whole devotion, and I would chant, and I would wear my bindi, and I had an altar, and all of these things. And he is actually who led me ultimately to African spirituality, because I was like, okay, I'm doing this and this is great. And I still have an altar for Shiva in here right now.
Right.
But I was like, what were Africans doing? Where's the African spirituality? And
right.
that's really what led me. I said, okay, I've studied Hinduism, I've studied Taoism, I've seen what the Chinese do, I've seen what the Native Americans do. We had stuff we did too. So where's that? And that's what led me down the path of seeking African spirituality on an intellectual level to begin with.
Right. This is just, this is so beautiful. Like it really is. Like this is probably one of the most special conversations I've had in a long time because no, seriously, because it's just really touching a place of like where you've just been questioning who you are as a person. Right? And where you come from.
The thing is that it was intentional. And once we realize that, that's the part that allows us to push it off and say, okay, these things were intentionally hidden from me. So I don't have to feel no way about not knowing it. It's intentional that I didn't know these things. And now I have the freedom and the ability to learn them. And so, like I said, that's one reason why I've had to really dedicate myself to being one to teach my people. I have my own online institute, Ashe Irakem University, where I teach courses in African spirituality. I teach Yoruba language. I bring in other teachers to teach courses. I'm going to have a course on Black Islam this year. We're going to have a course on Black religion and film. We've had a course on African and diasporic art and on Orisha practice specifically. So many different things to bring people just like you and just like all of the rest of the folks in the Ashe Ray family who are new to learning about these things, giving them a place to come and learn and create community together. And that's my life. It's my life, and I love it.
This is beautiful. And so everything that was just mentioned, it will be in the show notes, especially if you are like me right now, like I need more. This will all be in the, I'm serious. This is going to be in the show notes because this is so important for people. And even if you aren't someone of African descent, we all need to be educated.
Absolutely. There are universal truths in all of this. Just like Black folk have been learning about Greek and Chinese and all these other philosophies, other people can learn about African philosophy because, and many people do. There are non-Black people who are initiated into these traditions. There are non-Black people who are professors teaching on these traditions. And so there are absolutely universal truths that come through these traditions. And I did want to also mention, because I'm a scholar, I got to give you a couple of books, especially on the food aspect, because I know that's what you focus on here. A great book for everybody to check out is called In the Shadows of Slavery, Africa's Botanical Legacy. And this talks about exactly what I spoke about a little earlier, about all the different plants and food items that were brought to the Americas along with Africans. And I mean, the list is huge. I mean, black eyed peas, watermelon, the type of hibiscus we make sorrel from, ackee, all of these different things that we think of, you know, perhaps as being Black American foods or Caribbean foods, plantains and bananas, right? All of these things, although plantains and bananas didn't originate in Africa, we cultivated 43 different varieties of plantain on the continent and 23 different varieties of banana. So all of the varieties of banana and plantain that came here came from the continent post-African cultivation, right? And so many different items that have come from the continent that influence certain types of spinach, right? I mean, sesame, right? All of these kinds of things that either originate from the continent or were meaningfully cultivated there and genetically engineered there. Please, I want to mention this too, because I know this idea of genetic engineering gets a bad name because we're thinking of it in terms of chemicals, or we're thinking of it in terms of unnatural things. Human beings have been genetically engineering food since the beginning of time. We have been crossbreeding plants to get bigger. We've been crossbreeding plants to be sweeter. So apples are actually one very big example of this. If you look at an ancient apple, you couldn't even bite it. They were so hard and they were so bitter. And so it was humans who cross-pollinated, crossbred, did all these things to cultivate the apples that we have now that are softer and sweeter and all of that. Same thing with broccoli, all these different things that were not natural, so to speak, but that human beings cultivated over time and that became naturalized. And so I just want us to be careful about kind of unilaterally thinking that something is negative just off the bat, and also B, taking the African out of it, because we are the ones who began all of this genetic engineering. We're the ones who began splicing these plants and saying, let's make them bigger. Let's make more starch in this. This will be better to eat if it's like this. Let's put these two together that we see already grow big and make them even better, right? And that's what they did with the bananas, the plantains, and watermelons and other plants.
I'm speechless right now. Like, seriously, because I mean, I knew some of this information, but by way of it just being started in Africa, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, we started all of that. We started those things, right? And so, and we have been doing them for forever and ever. Most of the grains, the diversity of grain. Right? Africans probably eat some of the most diverse grains on the planet. We eat sorghum, millet, rice, every kind of grain you can find somewhere on the continent. Amaranth, teff, right? All of these different grains that you don't see anywhere else in the world. Right? We cultivate them, we find ways to prepare them, and all of those kind of things. So that's one book. There's another book if people are interested specifically in food in the Orisha tradition. There's a book called Religion in the Kitchen. And that book actually talks about all of the different food offerings for Orisha and the importance of food. And even if a person doesn't really know too much about Orisha practice, they'll find it interesting, I think, as far as looking at how food and spirituality are connected and the ways that we use food in our spiritual practice.
This has been beyond a treat, a blessing, like all the things. Like, I'm not even joking right now.
Ashe.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about what I love. You see, I'm hyped. So,
listen, I am just as hyped. I'm just sitting down. But if I was standing up, I'd be like, whoa, my God. This is insane and amazing. So on Sundays, can people access, like, where can they actually access your, so is it like an actual, like, service or?
Yeah, absolutely. We do prayer and meditation. I preach a sermon and then we meditate afterwards. And
Oh my
so,
goodness.
absolutely, everybody is invited. Everything, the key to everything is on my website, aseire.com. That is ASEIRE.com. And so from there, you'll see a link to where you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and where you can just explore everything that we offer.
Oh my goodness. And like I said
Including
before,
people can book personal consultations with me as well. So I do that, personal divinations and spiritual counseling sessions as well.
that is, wait a minute, I had no idea about this. This is awesome. So you said, so it's like a one-on-one, you called it divination?
Right, or what people will colloquially call a reading.
Okay.
So, I'll pray over you and then we
Uh-huh.
look in to see what the divine has to say about what's going on with your life right now. So I use different tools to do that. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's a beautiful time. And people often get a lot of good insight around what's going on in their lives.
Oh my goodness. Yes. This is amazing. So once again, all this information that was just shared will be in the show notes.
Beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for opening up these conversations. Again, it's so important. Again, just to bring it back to the food piece, as you know, and as I know is a big part of why you do this, African Americans still have some of the worst health outcomes of
Yes.
anyone in this country. And so much of it has to do with how we eat.
Mm.
Food, as Elijah Muhammad has talked about, is our medicine.
Right.
Food, we have to eat to live. Food is our medicine. And so, vegetables, drinking, water and all of these things. And again, recognizing that these are African ways to eat. African
Right.
staple foods are grains and vegetables, right?
Hmm.
There's meat, there may be some meat or fish in it, but the majority of what's eaten is grains, is cassava, is plantain, is corn, is spinach or other leafy greens, ground nuts and peanuts and things of that nature, plantains.
Right.
It's not, dairy products and cheese. Those things are really, you don't even really find them too much on the continent
Right.
like that. So, healthy eating is our birthright. And we absolutely need to be more mindful of what we put in our bodies. We can't strengthen our spirits if we're still poisoning our bodies.
That is such an amazing point, and I'm glad you said that because what I think people that disconnect of realizing that when your body is, if you're not, actually placing proper things in your body like fruits and vegetables and things like that. I mean, it's not to say you can't have some stuff every once in a while. You can treat yourself. But
Right. But
when
if
you're
it's
not,
every day,
yeah, if it's an everyday, Popeye's chicken, it's like, oh, here we are. Like it's eventually going to, manifest in heart disease, diabetes, and all those
right,
things.
right. And all of those things that we are the leading people who have it, right?
Right.
Second leading cause of death for Black women. 2 Black women in my family who were barely, one was in her early 60s and one was barely 50, just died of heart attacks.
Wow.
Okay? Like, this
Right.
is serious. This is
It's very
serious. We
serious.
have to take our health seriously. We have to take our eating habits seriously. We can't be on all these medications or
Right.
counting on medication to do it and then we're still eating the way we were. Like, and I'm not vegan. I'm not, I love my cheese and my eggs and my all of that.
Right.
But I make a very concerted effort to do a lot of vegan cooking, to
Right.
incorporate vegetables into every meal, and all of those types of things, to fast at times on, juices. I tend
Right.
to do, even though I never really called it this, but just my natural way of eating, I tend to do intermittent fasting. I don't tend to eat until usually afternoon. In the
Okay.
morning, I'll drink some water, drink some coffee, drink some juice, and then I eat, usually around noon or 1 for the first time.
Right.
And so, all of these types of practices to just really recognize our bodies are so important, and
Yes.
to take care of ourselves, because we are temples of the divine, right? We are holy temples. We are holy and sacred ground, and we absolutely have to treat ourselves that way.
I cannot agree more. And once again, I cannot thank you enough. You all, this has been beyond amazing. And
Ashe.
uh, I'm just blessed right now. I really am. I really am. And I
Well,
hope you
thanks.
all were just as blessed. And I can't imagine that you weren't from listening to this actual episode. I wish we could be on longer. If you don't mind, if please come back.
Oh, sure. You know, anytime, anytime. I'm happy to come back.
Yeah.
I thank you for inviting me and for all that you're doing to encourage and support healthy eating habits in our community is so important.
Oh, yeah. That I mean, that's my goal because I've had so many people in my family die by way of just how they were eating, really. And I just want to see people just be educated around eating,
Right.
and then try to do better and to live long lives,
That's
long
right.
happy
That's right.
lives.
That's right.
Seriously,
Ashe,
seriously.
Ashe. It's one of
Yeah.
our primary blessings. And Ifa, we say one of our biggest blessings is aiku, or a long life. And
Mm,
so we can't do anything else if we're not here. So
right.
doing the things that will give us long life is one of our first spiritual duties.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Yes, you have to come back.
Yes, indeed.
And this is definitely, I'll just see you later because I can't even imagine like not having you back on because there's so many other things I want to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, I'll look
Oh,
forward to it.
yes, all you all, we have been blessed today. We have been beyond blessed today. I am so happy you took the time to listen to this episode of the Eating Me podcast. I will see y'all on the next episode. I'm just high right now. I'm like on an amazing high right now. So thank you so much again.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see y'all later.